Oh, well, it was Final Fantasy VII, and it was in my nana's house. My uncle had a PlayStation 1, no memory card, so we repeated the up to wall market section over and over and over again until finally we got our own game, own console, own games, started playing it, and honestly it was good, but there wasn't any that particularly stayed in mind at the time. However, when I got older and started replaying them, I appreciated what a much greater art form these games were, and since then it just kind of grew.
My first Final Fantasy experience was Final Fantasy VII. My friend Bradley, I was about, how old would I have been? I must have been about 10 or 11. He had a PlayStation 1, and I just went over to his house. I biked over to his house one day, and he was playing Final Fantasy VII, and he was running around on the world map. And I thought, wow, this game looks great, and he was in the Chocobo stable with his birds, and I was like, this is cool. So I plucked up the courage to ask my mother to buy it for me, and eventually she did. But the first Final Fantasy game that I bought myself was Final Fantasy VIII. I bought it from Woolworths, which no longer exists, that was the beginning of my own personal journey.
If I had my way, it would absolutely be true. So I'm going to have to get some help with the right staff, and we can make this a reality.
Yeah, sorry Alan, not going to happen.
Well, on the top of my head, I do recall one particular aspect, which was the draw points, which just originated from Final Fantasy VIII. Now, before the big pomade came along, we had this idea that we would have multiple of them scattered around the venue, and it'd be these tangible objects that would have these special lights attached to them so that they reflected the draw points themselves from Final Fantasy VIII. Now, it turned into the kiosk, of course, which is a much handier way of doing it. But back then we had an old forum, and we had a section where people could give in their ideas. We've had everything back then, from the Chocobo hot and cold minigame in Final Fantasy IX to Blitzball ideas in 10, which is a bit of an insurance liability, so that was never going to make the cutting board.
We've probably brainstormed a billion ideas since the beginning, and sometimes ideas come together, months, weeks, days, even hours before the event sometimes. There are things. There are some big things that we got very close to accomplishing that just didn't pan out. But there are things that we hope to accomplish in the future. So if I say it, then I can't do it. So.
I think I always believed it was going to be something quite good, because when I first got involved in it, I hadn't much to do with conventions or fan gatherings myself, but I just saw this idea and said, I need to get involved in this. The one thing I did not predict is how much it would not only affect my life, but how much it would, as phrase, get into my own heart. It has been indescribable.
No, I had a feeling that it was going to be a solid project, that perhaps I'd do one a year, maybe two. But I had no idea that it was going to grow to the size that it has. I've worked on a lot of different events over the last 15 years now, from award ceremonies to theatre productions to musicals, and then I entered the world of conventions. So I don't know. No is the short version. It grew way beyond what my expectations were. Well, naturally, because I didn't imagine it getting to where it is now. Yes, my views have changed. I spend more time on KupoCon than I do on any other project now. And, all we can do is take it one step at a time and grow as we grow. I think that we have a really bright future ahead of it, and we'll just keep pushing forward.
Yes, and if any of you knew me from the beginning, you knew that there wouldn't have been a situation where I'd be speaking in front of a camera, because my roles seem to have just went right up. I think Alex and I, we got along really well. We did everything together from the get-go once we were involved, and certainly I was happy to take this backseat behind the scenes role to just do the work and make it happen. But here I am doing this interview, and I'm very grateful to be going on stage to introduce the event alongside him. As for the future from this point onwards, I think it's just going to get bigger. And what happens then, as I say from 3 years ago, is simply unpredictable. I have to be honest, I'm not the most creative at ATEs. I would love to say I come up with some of them, but I'm really just how would you call it, the filter between ATEs. If you ask Alex the same question, I guarantee you will have memories to write down for this.
What's the craziest? I mean, the kazoos was pretty out there, wasn't it? Getting, hundreds of people to grab a kazoo and do along to a Distant World soundtrack. Which is actually given birth to one of the latest ATs we're working on, called Sassy-Roff. Yeah, I mean, the active time events are always crazy. We always look at each game and say, oh, can we incorporate this? Can we incorporate that? Personal favorites up to date? I enjoyed the skipping rope challenge from 9. That was fun. Everyone failed at it, and it was funny to watch at the Wii Pom. And I mean, Big Bros Challenge, it's a classic. It's KupoCon classic content.
I would love to know the context of the question, but if I am to assume this is what I think it is, then Alex would make the first move. I play hard to get. He knows this.
I'm going to assume I understand the question, and I am very embarrassed to admit it would probably be me. Okay, I assume this isn't a physical question. My favorite feature of Alan is that he tells me the truth when others won't. See, one of the difficulties of being at the top of the chain or pyramid or ladder or whatever you want to call it is that a lot of people will just agree with you to agree with you, and what they call a yes person. Even if I want Alan to say yes, if he thinks it's a bad idea, he'll tell me so, and he always gives me an honest opinion, and that's something I truly admire, and I'm thankful for.
My favourite feature of Alex. Is this going to be public? Can I answer this one? I mean, I'm being signalled I can't answer this one because of obvious reasons, so next question, please.
Oh, wow. New Jersey. Naturally, we've been talking for months before this, and we bumped into each other just as he got out of the elevator. And honestly, that's the only recollection I have. It's kind of like, naturally, first time you meet someone, it's a little bit awkward, but we already knew each other quite well by this point. I mean, we spoke on a daily basis. So it felt pretty natural. And before we knew it, I felt like it was just another day working with Alan.
Now, I recall this quite well, but it's uninspiring to say the least. It was a Thursday, it was a Friday. It was the day before the event. I just come back from exploring New York, got to my room, came downstairs and met him outside an elevator. It was him and Nat at the time, and we both had a sort of awkward but happy smile, quick embrace, down to business, and the rest is history. It was funny that because you speak to each other for so long online afterwards, and then you see each other face to face. It's a little unusual, but it was fine. I don't think we realised just what a journey we're about to begin from that moment, and how close us two are going to be especially. But I can still recall it. He was quite young back then. Only one of us is aged. Most challenging aspect. I can think of different ways to answer this question. Now, from a technical perspective, there are some days in which I find the morning prep the hardest part, because one of my main aims during an event is Alex would take a lot of care of all the theatre and a lot of technical aspects behind it. I'd be kind of checking all the different areas between the merchandise, so walkers, and making sure there's things okay in the registration section, guest signings. So my biggest aim is getting volunteers up to date. And sometimes venues or hotel staff aren't the most accommodating for us trying to get set up. So balancing all that in time is the only concern I really have going into the events. Master that, then the rest of the day is just fine. But from other perspectives, there's kind of jokes about how bad an eater I am. And the UK is great though. I remember in Birmingham being able to go over and there's a Tesco next door, get all my corn products, but it's so difficult still eating out on these occasions, where there's a story where some friends called over and they came into my room and they went to the bathroom and they discovered that I had to try cook it was a fillet of sauce with grains over it, and it's just floating there in a plastic tub in the bathtub in the attempt to heat it up. But other than that, there's not much difficulty really. I mean, there's a home life you got to balance doing these events. They take up a lot of time and a lot of energy, but it wouldn't change that.
That's difficult. Okay, I'll try and... There's several aspects that are quite challenging. Logistics. Logistics can be a real pain when it comes to an event. There are so many moving parts, and sometimes if one moving part breaks, it affects another. It's like a chain reaction. I can think of like when our special guests were traveling to the Wee Pom. The East Coast was getting bashed by a really bad storm. And, Robbie had just landed in the UK. Thankfully, the West Coast was fine. Robbie just landed, couldn't find his train tickets. Was it because I hadn't booked them? Was it because Robbie had lost them? How were we going to get him up to Glasgow? Right, got to get that dealt with, got to book that. Then you get an email from Quentin. My flight's been cancelled because of weather, and now I'm stuck in London for the next 8 hours. Okay, right, what should we do? Get him on the next plane to London, book him into the hotel. So, there's a lot of troubleshooting with KupoCon. And it's very, very challenging, especially when you have to deal with something on the spot. I can think of a number of occasions where things really have been close to the line. In fact, at the first KupoCon at Newark, New Jersey, the Big Pom, I was going to a Distant Worlds concert the night before, and as the lights were coming down in the auditorium and everyone was starting to clap as Arnie Rolf was coming onto the stage, I was on the phone to Staples, screaming down the phone, asking where my print material was for the first ever KupoCon, and my language I was using was rather expletive, we'll say that.
Man, there's two answers for this, and I'm just going to start with the cheesy one because it's a given. It's the people you meet along the way, it's the memories, the experiences, and it sometimes seems very easy to say that because it seems almost like a generic answer when you have an event like this, but it is the highlight. I can look back at all the nice things I have and think, wow, that was wonderful, what an amazing trip that was to this particular town or city. But when I look at Facebook, for example, and see all the friends I've had over the last couple of months, or the fact that I'm sat here in my partner's house, interpret partner as you will, and that's clearly and most easily the best thing that comes out of these events. And naturally now I've had some amazing items. If you don't know me by now, Naniki is my character, and I've had cosplays made of him, I've had soft toys, I've had even recreations of the tales, tons of artwork. Every little gift like that is so appreciated, and it's just a testament to how much it shows people appreciate the work we do. And myself and Alex, we don't make money from this. We just pour our heart and soul, time and energy and our own resources and finances into it. And for people to turn around and show that they really loved it is incomparable. It's absolutely priceless.
I think I would say the bonds that I have established with so many people, because when I go on my Facebook now, or I look at an event attending list and I recognize so many names, attendees and staff, volunteers, it's very heartwarming to see that. And I find that incredibly rewarding. I find that these relationships that I've built with people has, dramatically changed my life to a point where I can't even imagine what it was like before KupoCon. That's incredibly rewarding. And obviously, naturally, one of the most rewarding friendships that I've gained from this is Alan. He's someone I talk to on a daily basis, sometimes hourly. The relationships I've built with people are worth everything to me. Ooh. There's quite a few. I don't think I could pinpoint one. From a sad perspective, I have a couple, and from a happy perspective, I have a few. One of the most emotional moments during the KupoCon roller coaster, it was really way back when. I was sat in the living room. No, I wasn't. I was in my office, and I got a message from Nostradamus saying that they needed to talk to me immediately. And I was like, okay, unusual. And I picked up the phone, and then I discovered within minutes that Protsko had died in a car crash. By this point, I hadn't met the boys. We hadn't met in person. However, plans were in place for the Big Palm. It was like 2 months before. There had been talk of London, and I remember them, saying Protsko's dead. That was the exact words I heard over the phone. And I was like, I just remember kind of like being stunned, like not knowing how to react. And I just said, look, I'm really sorry. What can I do? And I remember I went in and I told Nat what was going on. And, the next 24 to 48 hours after that were unreal. I distinctly remember, while it is a little embarrassing, I distinctly remember I went for a coffee the next morning. And some woman, I don't know who she was, she just made a general comment to me, like a compliment. She was like, she said, just let me stop you. She said, I just want to say that you look very smart today, and it's nice to see, young people taking care of themselves and, not running around looking like plebs. And I just, I was very flattered. I said, thank you very much. And then I remember sitting in the car and I just burst into tears. And I think it was because I was overwhelmed by someone's kindness at a very low point, because for those who didn't know, Andrew died in a car accident because of a distracted driver. And excuse me. And while you see, there's so much negativity in the world and so many stupid and bad people, that just little ounce of goodness kind of made me feel a bit better about the world, and it was just very overwhelming. I know it sounds dumb, but that was tough.
The most emotional. Sometimes just watching Alex tear up is enough to get me teary-eyed. When I look back at it, I realize that the weeks leading up to Andrew's accident, we were talking in Messenger about him coming to London, and he said, look, what's the chances of us coming to Mind the Palm? And I said, quite high. And I said, it's looking like the project's coming together. And he was getting really excited, and he's was basically checking should he get a passport, because he didn't have one at the time. So yeah, that was very, very emotional time. And even just looking back on it now, knowing that the Tripom caricature
is actually on his headstone. It's very overwhelming.
To say the Warrior of Light Awards, it's a very easy answer at that point, and I think the Repalm is a great example of that. I'd recall that we began the cosplay awards, so everything's fine, it's smooth, it flows well, and once we've delivered the 2 awards, we looked each other in the eye, and it was this pang just right in the chest, and you could feel a burn in the eyes, and we hadn't even said a word. We just knew the next section was presenting a particular special staff award, which is to the wonderful Nikki Anderson. And then after that, Warrior of Light Award. And I think out of all of, it's very hard to differentiate between all of them because they're only given to people who we know are just so special in the first place. Like that's why we've so many more awards to give, which we're very grateful for. We'll never run out of Warrior of Light Awards. But every time one of those begin, that's it. And I think if I can get as specific as I can, the one in Birmingham Palace, which is awarded to Harley Derrick, was actually the first one I'd seen. I wasn't actually around, but I was there, but I didn't see it being presented to our very own Right Mage Wonders. So seeing it for the first time was definitely the very defining moment.
Yeah, there was a couple of days before KupoCon in Birmingham. It was Pomathon, and what we call our security liaison, who is a guy who works from our side but works with the hired security team to give them the runabout of exactly how a KupoCon works. And that job in the UK for UK KupoCons is Neil's, and Neil is my stepfather. And a couple of days before Pomathon, he was experiencing really bad stomachache, like really bad. And it just so happened that he needed to have his appendix removed. And this all happened 48 hours before KupoCon. I said, Neil, you can't come, like you're gonna have to rest up. And he's like, no, I'm coming, I'm doing this. And when I was talking about Neil on stage at the closing of Pomathon, I fell apart. I found that incredibly difficult because, you know, it's someone personal to me. So that was very challenging. But it was a very emotional and wonderful moment. And then naturally the Warrior of Lights. The Warrior of Light Awards, presenting those is incredible. Like there's nothing quite like the feeling of giving someone an award, especially with such emotion attached to it. It's the same with the newly founded Falsi Award. It gives you a really, really great feeling to be able to present something like that.
Oh well, Naniki is an obvious one, and it's for multiple reasons. This wonderful thing whereby I pick the numbers on a Naniki card. It's 8, A, 3 and 2. And I have given some indication as to what they stand for, as in it's a particular date. And ever since I gave them, I've not revealed what they actually mean, what they represent. And I've had this thing that I'll never explain what it is, because if I do, I'll have no more mysteries to talk about. So while it's absolutely teasing Alex what these numbers mean, if I tell him, then the mystery's over. So I can't let him know.
Surprisingly, Tella. I've always liked the artwork on Tella. Don't know why. Tella's not even my favourite character, not by a long shot, but I really like the artwork on it. Maybe it's the kind of the 3D-ness on the scepter and stuff. I'm not sure, but I just really like that card. I also very much like the Orin Limit Break card. All the Limit Breaks are great. I mean, to be fair, all the cards are fantastic, so all of them.
I would go straight back to the Repalm. I would find whoever the second or third person was to hand Alex whatever drink it was at the time and say, no, your liver is in danger. So, but no, to be honest, there's nothing I can think of on the top of my head that would change. It's funny that with KupoCon, because you love it and you love as from beginning to end, but you can't help but walk into an event and almost look forward to the 6 o'clock mark, because then you can look back and say, that went really well. But you can't predict at the same time what will happen. So I know, for example, in, let's say, Birmingham, the Electric Cinema was a wonderful idea that was all going well, then technical faults near the end just make things a little difficult, and you could say at that point, oh, I wish I can go back and make things different, but you can't in the end. So honestly, there is nothing I would change, and I think if there were some things that were not so great, they're not regretful. So I think in that regard, it's been going well.
Oh, that's quite tough actually. I mean, when I do look back at everything we've done, yes, there have been minor mistakes here and there that I kind of say, oh, I wish I'd done that slightly differently, or we should have done that, not this. But there's nothing that stands out to me like I'm like, yes, God, I really wish I could go back and change that. Nothing that was us. I mean, sometimes there were things that other people did that were out of our control, which I wish I could change and fix. But from our perspective now, I think we've done great, and I like to look forward, not back.
My favourite event is Pomathon. And when I say Pomathon, that's both the daytime and the evening time. That's an easy one. I'm not sure what it was. Perhaps it was the first time we had a very strong, dedicated staff base, whereby we had very specific roles laid out in advance. It was a nice, kind of distinct venue. And the idea in the evening about just having a ball, and for us, especially main staff, to just sit back and let it happen, that was just a blast. It was the first time, in fact, I had a lot of fun. At the night time, I tried not to do any work. And as a result, I had a massive come down, as people know. But I've gotten over that well, so definitely Pomathon was the best.
My favourite event, I would have to say Pomathon. It was the event that wasn't meant to exist. I mean, it wasn't meant to be there. It only existed because Pommy and Palace sold so well. It was a combination of all the things that had worked so well in Generation 2 to create 2.1. Yeah, everything worked. Loved it. Great staff, great attendees, just brilliant.
To come down for me after Pomathon was the lowest point for me as far as KupoCon is concerned. It's been the lowest I've been in quite a few years. Now, some people it might seem, oh, it's typical con blues, you had a great time, you missed it and all. I think it's quite different from a perspective like mine, because I would have spent a few months alongside Alex preparing for it, trying to make it happen, and then you're on stage at the beginning to introduce it, you're there at the end, and there's so much you'd invested for that one day that when it goes, it's quite heavy what happens to you. Now, I'm not sure what happened. It's so hard to describe these powerful calm blues, but I went into a really low point, and a couple of other factors and other things going on, it was quite dangerous for me. That at one point I had this conversation with Alex, because I couldn't quite escape the feeling for a good month or so, and I said, if I can't get this to change, then by London that would have to be my last event, because I couldn't go on that way. And we had this conversation about 2 days later as well, where I think it's sunk in for both of us what we had just said. And I recall us talking about going into Palm Saucer and how is it going to be for us to walk on stage and to deliver KupoCon as authentically as possible while I was in this state. And it got to the point where, if you imagine dipping down further and further, you hit this mark where if you go just a tiny bit underneath it, that's it, it's over. And I think it was this pivotal question that says, are you coming to Palm Saucer? And at that moment, I broke down, because there was a lot going on as well. And it was such a defining moment for what was such massive build-ups and investments over those years, and things that mattered so much to me. Like everyone I'd met, and more importantly, talking to Alex at that moment. And when I got to that question and broke down, recovered just a little bit, that I was able to say yes. And when we kind of saw eye to eye how it meant for both of us, we just moved along with it as we always do. And I've even closer than ever now. I'm in his house, haven't I? You know? But yeah, I think it's safe to say at this point that it shouldn't happen again. People don't sometimes understand just how much you put yourself into these events and how much it means. And I know a lot of attendees do. A lot of you watching this now would get that. But someone, I guess, who can overview and overlook it all, and whose role is, in some regard, just almost stand there as the person in KupoCon, as the community manager. It was definitely the hardest and lowest point, not just the last couple of years, but all of KupoCon. And it's one that I'm very glad to say, thanks to Alex, I've been able to get over.
You know, attendees had spoken about feeling low after, you know, a convention. The con blues, I think, isn't the most generic term. I didn't feel it, didn't understand it. But as time progressed, I started to become very attached to the staff members and, you know, the team that I'm working with. And, you know, you start to see familiar faces, attendees that you see and you look forward to seeing. And then Alan experienced a major Kupo come down at Birmingham, and I had mine at Toronto at the next event afterwards. And, you know, it knocks you for six. You don't know how to operate anymore. So the only way I was able to push through it was, you know, exercise, food, and like a good diet, and just to concentrate and push myself forward. But yeah, I found it incredibly challenging. I remember I was sat in Toronto. It was after Palm Saucer, and we just had breakfast. We'd just come back from breakfast, and I was sat on the sofa in the hotel lobby with Alan and Mo Gallagher and Amy, and I remember distinctly just kind of, I was completely zoned out. I was not there, you know, I was there, but I wasn't. And Amy, our warrior of light, turns to me and says, are you okay? And I kind of made eye contact with her, and she's like, you're not okay, are you? And I was like, no, I'm not, you know, something like that. I can't remember the exact words. And it really sank into me that I wasn't in a good place. And I used the time between Toronto and Glasgow to sort myself out, to bring myself back up to where I needed to be. But yeah, the Kupo come down is incredibly real, and it does have a severe impact on people, especially the WePom. I noticed a lot of our staff members felt it because they were reaching the same stage that myself and Alan had already reached. So it's bad, but it's also nice because you know you're emotionally attached to it, you're emotionally invested in the people that you work with, and we're there to support each other. So it doesn't, whatever's thrown at us, it just makes us stronger. You know, what doesn't break us makes us stronger, right?
If you could have some kind of downsized version of POMX in Ireland, I'll be all up for that. You know, not that I'm too lazy in the travelling front, but you know, I can scout out a venue at least. I know there's a lot of people from Ireland who do travel that way, and it'd be nice to show some people around, but I'll have to see. If I had to think of somewhere further afield, oh, that's a tricky one. There's a lot of nice countries to visit, but I'm not sure they'd be the best place for KupoCon just yet. But I mean, we've been to so many major cities already, it's hard to know. I would like to try the rest of the US someday, but I'll have to see,
Well, seeing I'm in the driving seat here, I'm kind of giving you clues if I tell you. We want to do more events in the States, eventually. We just got some stuff to work out before we push the button on those. The West Coast is a given, it's got to happen eventually. When, I don't know, and Japan takes my fancy. So does New Zealand, but with Australia on the cards right now, I'm not sure I could fit that in anytime soon.
That's a good one. I know quest logs tend to have some little cryptic moments in them. I know in particular one quest log that does. I actually myself left a cryptic message in the group page one day, and it was, how much can I say? It wasn't a thank you post. I won't say which one, I won't say when I made it, but in it I have left a it's kind of an obscure code because you have to read a sentence, and then following up from that sentence, you have to crack a code that follows in the next paragraph or two. But I have something in there, and it also relates to those numbers I was talking about on the TriPom card.
TriPom cards, for example, a lot of the numbers on the TriPom cards represent different things. I know that my daughter's birthdays are on some of them, my birthday's on some of them, KupoCon anniversary dates are on some of them. The quest logs are jam-packed full of stuff, but many of which I do not care to talk about, so move on. It's quite difficult.
I feel like I'm tossed up between indescribable and priceless. I think priceless kind of works better that way, because it's the kind of thing and the kind of event whereby you can't recreate it. You know, I can have great moments doing different things in life, and I can sort of get back to that moment again by doing similar things. But something like KupoCon isn't something you can just do again in other settings. You can't recreate the people, you can't recreate any of it. So I think priceless would, that'd be a word, because there's nothing there I could trade it for.
Very difficult. KupoCon has been life-changing. It's not an exaggeration. It literally has changed everything. It's changed me. No, I don't think it's changed me. I think it's given me the ability to, you know, before KupoCon I worked on these award projects, and we gave awards to people who were extraordinary and would think outside the box. And I feel like KupoCon has allowed me to see outside of the box, allowed me to see the world in a much brighter way. And I found that KupoCon has made me more comfortable with my own self. It's life-changing. That's the only way I could really describe it in summed up quickly, would be life-changing.
I mean, thank you would almost be too obvious. It would be a given. I feel like when I think of the attendees, I think of everyone who could be watching this now, or everyone who I've met over the last couple of years. It's hard to get much better than thank you, but I guess even this is something as strong as say I love you all. And that's not an exaggeration. There's nothing I love more about going back to a KupoCon, knowing that there's so many people who legitimately care about that I'm going to see again. And that's why, if people used to ask me, you know, why KupoCon? What do you get out of it? And, you know, I go around the world, I spend all this time and effort into it, and I love every bit of it. It's all because I know people on the other end are the ones, all of you, are what's worth doing it for. So thank you. There's no point thanking us for all of this, because what we get out of you guys, that's priceless. Just thank you.
What would I say that I haven't said before? It's difficult to give a message to people without sounding like, you know, I don't want it to sound generic, because you're like, oh, thank you, it means a lot to us, we appreciate your support. And it's something that people have heard us say 101 times. But I really mean it. Like, there are thousands of people who've attended a KupoCon in the past 3 years. And the impact that it has had on the project is incredible. But it's not just about the project, it's about the impact that it's had on me. I literally feel reborn. I feel like it just changed everything. So truly, from the bottom of my heart, the deepest depths of that dark thing, thank you for allowing us to create a community literally fulfilling so many people's lives. Like, our community is pure, you know? So, you know, I always find myself lost for words because I've said it so many times, but I mean it. Thank you. I'm thankful for what you've all contributed, because without everyone, without us all coming together to create this, there's nothing. And I'm confident that there's a really bright future ahead of us.